And we've been on the theme of the Noble Eightfold Path for a while now, since it's such a rich theme. And so today I want to continue that, and I want to continue with one of the path vectors, one of those 8 that I've already talked about, which is wise or right effort. And I want to just, like I do all the time, like every time I teach, give a little bit of context on the Noble Eightfold Path, just a few phrases. So the Eightfold Path consists out of 8 steps, as the name says, 8 path vectors. And these are wise or right view, so depending on the translation, some teachers translate it as wise, that first part, or others as right. So wise or right view, wise intention, wise speech, wise action, wise livelihood, wise effort, wise mindfulness, and wise concentration. So those are the 8 factors of the path. And you've been listening to recordings about some of these path vectors. Carolyn has been talking about it, I've been talking about it. And last time that I was here, I gave a talk on wise effort, which was an overview of this path vector. And I gave a sutta quote, which I won't give this time. It's kind of a lengthy, flowery text. I'll just give the summary this time. So wise effort consists of 4 parts. The first one is striving to avoid unwholesome and unskillful thoughts and mental states that have not yet arisen. Second one is striving to give up unwholesome and unskillful thoughts and mental states that have arisen. Third, wise effort is to generate and develop wholesome and skillful thoughts and mental states that have not yet arisen. And then the fourth one is to maintain and nurture wholesome and skillful thoughts and mental states that have already arisen. And so together these are called the 4 great efforts. And so the first 2 are about unwholesomeness and how to work with that. And the second pair is about wholesomeness and how to generate that and nurture wholesomeness. And so I want to look at the pair that has to do with unwholesomeness tonight. And I just go over both of them. I'll start with the one where there's no unwholesomeness present, and we're looking at how do we prevent unwholesomeness from arising. That's what the first one is about. And so it would be nice, right, to prevent suffering, to prevent unwholesomeness, to prevent unsatisfactoriness from arising. And so I identified 3 ways we can do that, and there might be more, but I'll talk about these 3. The first one is to avoid what triggers us into unwholesomeness. The second one is to not engage in what triggers. And then the third one is to protect ourselves with wholesomeness. And so the first one is the avoiding or not engaging in what is triggering. And I do this a lot with food. I talked about this before. So like that I don't buy potato chips because I really like them, and if I buy them, the whole bag will be finished. So I know I won't be able to, I sometimes I am, but sometimes I'm not, and I just try to avoid this unwholesome behavior by just not buying any potato chips. And like another example could be not to go to the grocery store when you're really hungry. Yeah, that's really helpful. Just stuff yourself before you go to the grocery store. And there are examples in the suttas where, the monks, they are celibate, nuns as well, but usually for men it's a little harder to be celibate, traditional scene maybe. So what the monks sometimes do is just avoid looking around, looking at women or at men if they're interested in men, and just to keep their gaze kind of focused and not to wander around with their gaze so they don't get triggered. That could be a way of avoiding what triggers us. And there's this teacher, Joseph Goldstein, who mentions that he noticed us on retreat. There you stand in line for food and you're trying to get your food. And he had all these judgments about all the other people in the food line. And he notices that whenever he was looking around at the other people, these judgments were arising. So he would just keep his gaze down and not look around so that these judgments wouldn't arise. And so in the same way, we can identify for ourselves where is it that we can avoid certain triggers that are triggering us. Like, I don't know, maybe in traffic or maybe at work, or there are certain ways where we can probably avoid something and not be triggered. And in this way, cultivate or prevent that unwholesomeness arises in our awareness, in our minds and hearts. And sometimes this practice is called guarding the sense doors in Buddhism. And like I said in the meditation, we have 6 sense doors, so the 5 physical ones, and also the mind is the 6th sense door. And sometimes we can choose to not really engage with the sense door. And the mind is actually a great one to not engage with, because it's often the mind who is giving us trouble. So even if we are like looking around and we have judgments, or the monk has lust come up or whatever, it's the mind who is responding to the looking around, for example. So if we can guard this mind more clearly, more carefully, and stop before it turns into the lust or it turns into the judgment, that's harder than guarding the physical senses, like just not looking. But it is an option that we try to stop our minds from going somewhere. Like, you might know the experience that you're thinking something and you just realize, oh, I don't want to think about this, I'm stopping here. And you can just stop sometimes, not always. But that's a way that we can have the mind door guarded. And I just, as a side note, I think it might be good to note that it's not always a good idea to avoid, of course. So this is sometimes skillful and sometimes not. Like, if you know that your colleague is triggering you in some way, but you do need to work together, then it might not be so useful to just not engage with your colleague at all. You just need to get the job done, right? So this is not a skillful way. That's not the best way that you can deal with the situation. So you have to use your own wisdom for certain situations, if it's skillful to avoid or not. And if it's not possible, there are other ways we can deal with stuff as well. Avoiding is not the only way. It's just one of our tools in our toolbox. And so this is the avoiding or not engaging. And so they're kind of linked to sort of first to avoiding and not engaging in what is coming at our senses. And so I'm kind of grouping those a little bit together, the avoiding and the not engaging. And then I want to go to the third one, which is to protect ourselves with wholesomeness. And so when we have when a wholesome state of mind is present, then an unwholesome state of mind cannot be present. There can only be one thing at the same time. Sometimes it can seem like it's all there together. Like for example, a friend is leaving to go on a trip abroad, and you're happy for them, but you're also sad that they're gone, right? That they're leaving. So there seems to be happiness and sadness. But what's actually happening in the mind is that it's going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So it's never like at the same time. And so every time that a wholesome mind moment is present, there cannot be an unwholesome mind moment. And so in this way, if we cultivate wholesomeness, it can be protective of unwholesomeness to arise. So and wholesomeness is basically the second pair of the efforts, the great efforts, how to cultivate that and how to nurture it. So I won't go into that too deeply right now, but one way that is very obvious in the Buddha's teachings to do that is to cultivate the Brahma Viharas, or the 4 immeasurables, or the heavenly abodes, as they're called, which are the loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. Those are the 4 Brahma Viharas. Especially the loving kindness is well known, and we usually do just a few phrases of loving kindness at the end of the evening here. So I'll probably do that tonight too. So if you're not familiar with it, you'll get like a mini taste of loving kindness practice tonight. And if we practice any of the 4 Brahma Viharas, we're basically cultivating wholesomeness. And so it can be a great protector against unwholesomeness. The Buddha also says that, for example, loving kindness is the antidote to anger. So if we're angry or frustrated or irritated, practicing some loving kindness can be really helpful. Using just some of the phrases, either for ourselves, if that feels useful, or for another being, often can be helpful to use a being that's super easy, so that the loving kindness actually starts to be generated. And easy beings include, for example, pets, but also loved ones, or what is called a category of benefactor in Buddhism, which is like someone who has helped you on your path, or who supported you, is there unconditionally for you, or has been in your life at some point. Usually someone who you have not a super complicated relationship with. So you can just offer some phrases to that person, or to your pet, or sometimes a child that you know, your own child, or a niece or nephew or grandchild. And so that's how we can protect ourselves with wholesomeness. And so like, for example, if we know that we're going into a situation that's difficult, if we do some loving kindness for beforehand, some practice, or we know we're going to see someone who we find difficult, it can be really helpful to not maybe respond reactively, or to not be irritated by this person as much. And so the second of the great efforts is to abandon unwholesome states that already have arisen. So most of the time, it's kind of, it can be difficult to give up an unwholesome state. It's not that we can say, oh, go away, and then it's gone, usually. So we often do need a few tools. And so some of the tools we can use, and that I will discuss, are mindfulness, of course, wisdom, intention, and again, wholesomeness. And first, mindfulness, which is very important, because if we're not mindful, we don't know what's happening. So it's kind of a basic thing that we need in this kind of practice. And it's also actually a very special aspect of the mind. Like, with mindfulness, we're actually aware of what is happening in our lives. A lot of people in this world are just kind of on autopilot, basically. And mindfulness breaks that. With mindfulness, we can stop the autopilot, and we can take over the steering wheel and actually see what's happening. And so mindfulness helps us to, first of all, become aware that an unwholesome state might have arisen. And this fact, this seeing of unwholesomeness, sometimes already leads to the dissipation of it. just the seeing of it. And one of my teachers, Sayadaw U Tejaniya, he says, there are two means by which unskillful mental qualities are uprooted. One is that you simply become aware of them, and they naturally disappear. So that's what I just talked about. And then in this case, awareness does the work. He uses awareness and mindfulness interchangeably. The other way is that understanding arises about whatever unskillful root quality is present, and in this case, wisdom does the work. So one way is to just be aware and then it just dissipates, and the other way is that understanding arises. And so the Sayadaw U Tejaniya, he gives the explanation of why it would dissipate if you just look at it. He says, be sure to recognize that when you recognize something unwholesome, the very recognition that there is something unwholesome is itself wholesome. So if we recognize, if we are aware, if we are mindful, that is already wholesome. Just the mere fact of being mindful is wholesome. And so what I just said, if there is something wholesome present, something unwholesome cannot be present. But sometimes the unwholesomeness is so strong that the mindfulness is, like, it's this back and forth, and the unwholesomeness is too strong, so the mindfulness is not strong enough to kind of take over, so to speak. But sometimes it is, and that's great. So we can use this tool. And then the other way that unwholesomeness, that we can work with unwholesomeness is through wisdom. And so this is the understanding that Sayadaw talked about. Understanding and wisdom are also linked. And wisdom, first of all, needs mindfulness. And so when we start to clearly see that unwholesomeness arises, then we can start to see what kind of conditions might have led up to this unwholesomeness arising. Like we see, for example, we notice we're grumpy, and then we notice that we're hungry. So hungry, like hunger, has making us basically hangry. That's what it's called. So, or on Sunday evening, you think about Monday and you get all kind of anxious or annoyed, and then you realize that you're thinking about your work, and that's giving you this anxiety or this irritation. So we can see, like, what kind of thought patterns might be the cause for this unwholesomeness to arise, for this annoyance or this anxiety, and what kind of situation might be arising. Like sometimes just so simple as being hungry, you know. It doesn't always have to be something mind-blowing. And that way we can start to learn, like, I'm usually really okay with being hungry, and I don't get hangry at all, but my wife does. And so I learned that, okay, she's grumpy, oh, maybe she's hungry. And that helps me also to just have some compassion, like, oh wait, maybe we should just pause here and get some food first before doing something else. So just even that, like seeing that in other people, you know, can help us understand other people and feel more compassion, so that we don't get reactive towards their state of mind. And so also mindfulness can help us to see that unwholesomeness is actually painful and unpleasant. And, you know, that if unwholesomeness, whether it's sadness or anxiety or irritation or grumpiness, that it doesn't contribute to our well-being. Just seeing that with mindfulness can be helpful. Just realizing that, like, oh wait, that's a form of understanding. Like, oh wait, this is actually not so helpful. Even though it doesn't maybe clear up right away, it's still helpful to see it. And so this is kind of gaining insight into causes and conditions that lead to certain mind states or lead to certain situations. And in this way we start to slowly but steadily see what leads towards suffering and unsatisfactoriness and unwholesomeness, and what leads towards more wholesomeness and to satisfaction and to peace. And this is a process that is very gradual and doesn't happen overnight. It's like slowly but steadily we start to see, and meditation helps with that. When we just sit and observe what's there, we start to see certain patterns and conditionings. And so the effort in wise effort is not so much about striving or trying to make something happen. It's about being present with mindfulness for whatever it is that is here, and how can we learn from it? How can we grow? How can we see what leads to wholesomeness and what leads to unwholesomeness? And so each moment of mindfulness is kind of a little Lego piece building a Lego house. Yeah. So no moment of mindfulness is wasted. It's just a little Lego piece, and one piece you don't see what happens, but after a while, if we put the pieces, keep on going with those pieces, there will be like something built. Maybe a beautiful Lego house, or you got all these other Lego stuff nowadays, helicopters and whatnot. So you can build whatever you like. And another part of wisdom is to cultivate okayness with the unwholesomeness. Like every time we start to push away the unwholesomeness, like we start to resist it, it's actually contributing to more unwholesomeness, because the resistance in itself is unwholesome. And so actually not fighting can be very wholesome, but allowing the unwholesomeness. And not to be doormat in any way, of course, but that's just an encouragement to be present for whatever is there, even if it's unwholesomeness. And to see that pushing it away usually doesn't help. And then intention, we can use intention to help wisdom to arise. So this is another facet of the puzzle. The intention to learn, the intention to be okay with what is. Because if we don't have this intention, it's the direction, the course of our practice is not as clear, but intention really helps us to direct our course of practice. It really shapes our lives. Our intentions can shape our lives. And so we can really use this deliberately, like the intention to cultivate wholesomeness and the intention to let go of unwholesomeness. The intention to gain wisdom, to learn from things, to grow from what is difficult. And we probably won't get it all right away, which is fine. It's just a gradual process, to have the intention to have a gradual process and not have it all right away. It can also be an intention. And then the last thing I want to mention is wholesomeness. So also here, when we actively cultivate wholesomeness, we can kind of drive out the unwholesomeness. And so I don't have to say much more about that, I think, because I just talked about that already. I think I'll leave it at that. I just summarize that the first great effort, the preventing of the unwholesomeness from arising, we can do that through avoiding what triggers and not engaging in what triggers us, and also to protect with wholesomeness. And then the second great effort is to abandon unwholesomeness through mindfulness, through wisdom, through intention, and through wholesomeness itself. And I want to end with a quote from Robert Louis Stevenson, which was a Scottish novelist and poet who lived in the 19th century. In each of us, two natures are at war, the good and the evil. All our lives, the fight goes on between them, and one of them must conquer. but in our own hands lies the power to choose what we want most to be, we are.